the War Scroll is a text that has been composed of earlier source material. I am counted among the gods, and my dwelling is in the holy congregation. And who will attack me when I open my mouth? And who can endure the flow of my lips? In the strength of his power, the just exult, and the holy ones rejoice in justice. He established Israel from eternity, his truth, and the mysteries of his wisdom in all generations. I'm sure they had in mind that, it was going to be an absolute triumphant victory in which their enemies were going to be decimated and totally crushed, but probably not committing themselves to it happening exactly like this.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And today we are with Dr. Kipp. And you know what that means? We're talking Dead Sea Scrolls.
Hi, everyone.
Dr. Kipp.
It's always exciting to talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Absolutely. So am I. And I got my amateur Penguins copy over here.
I've got one of those too.
Hey, it's nice
right there.
Have. Nice to have.
And,
it's like a little cheat sheet. You know what I mean?
So that's right. So the translation that I do use most of the time is the English translation that I do use. It's one of these books that I lost in the move, actually, on the way back from Norway. But there's a more modern translation, I should say, than the Penguin edition by Michael Wise, Martin Abegg, and Edward Cook. It's just called The Dead Sea Scrolls Translated. It's published by HarperCollins. I'm biased because Marty Abegg is a good friend of mine, and he was my mentor when I was in graduate school.
Nice.
And he's actually, when I got to Trinity Western as an undergraduate, Marty Abegg was my the very first class that I had was with him, and it was Introduction to New Testament Greek.
His translation, is it like this one where it's sort of like it just has a lot of commentary, or is it just translations of the scrolls?
No, there's lots of commentary in there too.
Cool.
So
it's good to have that because we're dealing with texts that are really, really complex. So if someone just translated the scrolls and just sent it out, it'd be very confusing for most people.
It's true. Yeah. You do need it.
Yeah.
So, but I after I started university, I was so impressed with them that and the book the first edition had just been published. This was 1996, and I ran out and I bought it, and I brought it to him to sign for me, and he told me, he was like, oh wow, he's like, this is funny and unexpected. He's like, I've never done this before. He's like, you are the first person who's ever asked me to sign a book for them. And so that's what he wrote inside I'd show you if I still had it, but inside the cover he wrote Beveracha, which means with blessings.
Nice.
And then he wrote, you are the first.
Did he write it in did he write it with like the dialect of like the Aramaic, or was it like modernish Hebrew?
The English, the Beveracha was in Hebrew, of course.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the rest was in English.
Oh, okay.
And it's a good thing it was, because at the time I didn't know anything. So that was 1996. We stayed good friends all the way through. We're still good friends. He lives actually pretty close. He's only about 10 minutes away from where I am.
Nice.
But in 2014, I published my dissertation, my PhD dissertation, and my cheapskate publisher gave me 6 copies that I could distribute freely, and one of those copies I made sure to set aside for Marty, and I wrote in the front cover Bevelacha,
Nice.
you are the first. So, and when I gave it to him, he just about cried. It was pretty amazing.
Keep the
So,
keep the tradition going.
that's right. That's right. So, sorry, that's my
Oh, that's cool. That's interesting. It's fascinating. Now, is that what you wrote the dissertation on? Is this scroll or is it something else?
No. My dissertation is here, got it right here. This is it here. Let's see if we can get the light there. I don't know if you can read that. It says
Qumran,
there we go.
And
It's
okay,
the Cave 4
Apocrypha. Oh, Jeremiah.
Apocryphon
Okay.
of Jeremiah.
So that I want to. That's a good one. We should do a video on that next. Because that's a good. I was reading that in here, the commentaries on that. It's pretty interesting. But
the Apocryphon.
Yeah, the Apocrypha of Jeremiah.
Yeah,
it's a little pretty fascinating.
It's
interesting stuff the stuff they're writing in that time period. But what gets me going the most is the War Scroll. The War Scroll is just so good to read. It captures the time period. You feel like you're sitting in a war-torn Israel, and you see the troops of Rome marching over here, and you got the Qumran community over there, and you got the Sadducees over here, and the Essenes over here. It is all of that's there, except for Jesus, of course, which that's a little bit of a problem. Well, I digress.
Yeah.
But let's get into that. Why don't you tell us? Why don't you tell us a little rundown about it, and I'll ask some questions, and we'll just go from there.
I actually edited a book of collected essays on the War Scroll.
Oh wow, that's good. So
a number of years ago.
You know a thing or two.
I know a thing or two, but maybe not as much as you would like. And actually, speaking of the great Marty Abegg, he's the guy to talk to about the War Scroll, because he did his PhD dissertation on it. And this is actually, so this was a volume that was I don't know if you can see the title there, but it was a festschrift dedicated to him in honor of his 65th birthday. So this is all essays by great scholars about the War Scroll. So, and he is doing the newest edition of the War Scroll, which will be coming out in the Dead Sea Scrolls edition.
Ooh, nice.
Published by Brown. But so I digress a little bit. But yeah, let's talk about the War Scroll, because it's pretty fascinating.
For sure.
And as much as many of the Dead Sea Scrolls are really fascinating, the War Scroll is very, very interesting on many fronts, and I'm sure we'll get into some of those.
Yeah. First of all, the Kittim, or the Kittim, however you pronounce it, that is obviously a reference to Rome. Everyone knows that. It's not a secret. But
and it's derived, yes, it's a reference to Rome, and it's derived from Numbers.
Yeah, because that's what they were called back then in the eyes of the Jews.
Numbers chapter 5.
I wonder if they call themselves the Kittim, but
no, the Romans did not.
They never called themselves that. So that was just some name that was given by the Jews.
I don't believe so. Yeah,
interesting.
I'm pretty sure.
And it's one of the sons of Japheth in Genesis, if I'm not mistaken.
Like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yes, that's in there as well.
So it's fascinating. So yeah, give us a little rundown, basically. And I don't think it's too in depth, but just basically what is this scroll about, and then we'll just go from there.
Well, and this is really one of the interesting questions about the War Scroll, because what it's about is not clear. There continue to be a variety of scholarly interpretations of the War Scroll, understanding what it is and why it was written. I think early on, it was common to understand this as an apocalyptic text, because it's very, very clearly written within an apocalyptic worldview. And what I mean by that is it exhibits this this view of the world that believes the cosmos is divided into these forces of good and the forces of evil, and that they're embroiled in this constant cosmic conflict that affects every bit of the fabric of the universe, and that in the last days it will culminate in a great battle between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. Literally within the war scroll, these are identified as the sons of light and the sons of darkness, or the forces of God and the forces of Belial. And so there's going to be this enormous showdown between the armies of God and Belial, the sons of light and the sons of darkness. There's going to be seven battles, seven confrontations between them, and at the conclusion of six of them, it's going to be a stalemate, a tie, with the forces of God having won 3 and the forces of Belial having won 3, and then there will be a final battle, a seventh and final battle in which God will eventually emerge triumphant. So this is like kind of the Coles Notes background to the basic structure of the War Scroll, but it's very complicated because of a few things. Many scholars, and I think the prevailing theory now, and this is what I think too, it's probably better to understand the War Scroll, believe it or not, as a liturgical text. There is a huge concentration throughout of prayers and blessings. There are also lists, and there are rules contained within the War Scroll. So there's a school of thought right now, and this is actually one of the essays in the book of collected papers in here, was written by a very good scholar at New York University named Alex Jason, and he makes I think a very convincing argument that this is a performative text too. So this is not just liturgical, and it's not just predictive and eschatological in terms of its presentation of what's going to happen in the distant future. But this is a text that had an active role within the spiritual formation of the community. These are aspects of the text were probably enacted. And even after Jason, I was actually just noticing. I went through some bibliography yesterday and noticed that there's another article that's been written about this recently, just within the last year, I think, really more deeply investigating the language within the War Scroll, which indicates that a performative function. So the way certain sentences are constructed, the usage of specific verbs, demonstrates or minimally suggests that people were not just reciting it but acting it out.
Right, that's interesting. I also got from Geza Verme's notes, his commentary, that the dating of the scroll is in the time of Julius Caesar for a couple of reasons. And he thinks because the way they're describing the way the Romans, the Kittim, or however you pronounce it.
Kittim?
Yeah, Kittim.
Just say Kittim.
He's saying that they pronounce... Okay, so he says, a custom introduced to the Roman army during the time of Julius Caesar in the middle of the 1st century was to wear greaves at the cavalry only. So they're describing the cavalry of the Kittim as wearing greaves. So this is an indication by, I don't know if it's him that actually made this observation or if he's just writing in his commentary, but scholars have pointed out that this would be a good indication to date it into the beginning of the 1st century BC.
To the time of of Julius Caesar.
Yeah, so we have
Yeah, and
almost middle. Yeah.
yeah, and this, I mean, this kind of brings up another problem, another really interesting aspect of the War Scroll that we have to contend with, and that is the fact that the War Scroll um, is a text that has been composed of earlier source material. So,
That's a good point.
um, like whether or not,
So
whether or not,
this could be updated and changed over the years, and this could be written in the first century AD. We just don't really know, based on like his
yeah,
observation of the Greaves could have been an older text being updated a little bit. Is that what you're saying?
yes,
Makes sense.
or yeah, and I mean, if we could, maybe a good way to a good place to start or a good place to go here is to talk a little bit about um, like the sources that we have. So this is the digital Dead Sea Scrolls, um, and these are the scrolls that are essentially owned by what we call the Shrine of the Book
Hmm.
at the Israel Museum, and they're some of the most famous scrolls. The Great Isaiah Scroll, 1Q Isaiah A, right here. So you can actually
Oh, well, you can actually
look at.
unravel it like it's a real scroll.
I know, right?
That's so
It's
cool.
pretty awesome. I met the guy who did the who took all the photographs of this scroll for this site,
Yeah.
and when I met him, they had taken all of his pictures and basically printed them out in like a great big life-size replica, basically, of the
Wow.
scroll. It was pretty cool. So, uh 1Q Isaiah A, the famous temple scroll, and you can do the same thing with all of them, where you can pull them up, and you can scroll through the contents. They have all the you can see at the bottom, they have all the columns
I don't know why
numbered.
it's
It's
so
pretty
satisfying to look at these. What is it about these things that are so fascinating to look at? I can't
because
explain it. They look
they
so
are
cool.
they're beautiful,
They
you
really
know.
are though. Yeah.
uh the community rule, the whoops, sorry guys, the community rule, the Habakkuk commentary,
Hmm.
and of course the War
War
Scroll.
scroll. Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure why the War Scroll is the only one that is not in color. It could be because the actual document itself is too badly worn to be able to
Yeah.
read with the naked eye. I personally have never seen the actual War Scroll.
It might have been darker papyrus
Exactly.
so that you could
Exactly.
see it better
So,
into
I
this.
mean, this is like most of the photographs of the Dead Sea Scrolls that we look at are infrared, anyways, because of this issue, this problem. So, um, but so this is the War Scroll itself. It's designated 1QM, and what that means, and you can zoom right in on it here. Um, what that means is it was the 1 and the Q at the front basically mean that it was discovered in Qumran Cave 1 out of 11 caves. This was the first cave that was discovered by the Bedouin, and I'm sure most have heard the famous story of
Story, right. The two
um,
Bedouin kids were going out for a little walk,
yeah,
throwing rocks, and the
Mohammed
one kid threw a
Mohammed
rock
Al
into the
Dib.
cave.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, they
threw
just
the
heard
rock in the
ding, they heard
cave.
the split the noise of the urn being broken. And
Exactly.
they said they waited a day before they told anybody. They said if they would,
This is the story.
yeah,
Yeah,
I guess they
and
waited till the next day, right?
well, there's a lot of holes in this story too,
Okay,
because we're not sure how long they actually waited before they gathered the courage to go back
right.
and investigate. And then even after that, um, it was at least months. Some of us suggested it was up to 2 years
So they were just sitting there in
that
the sand, or
the scrolls were sitting on, on a satchel, on a tent peg, on
wow.
a tent pole, before they actually took them to
There's
the
that famous
antiquities
picture of the
dealer.
satchel too. This famous picture. Everyone knows that picture.
Right. So, so the War Scroll was discovered in Cave One, and it's one of the later manuscripts at Qumran. It's dated, I think, to uh, about the first half, closer to the middle of the first century CE or AD, and we date them on the basis of the handwriting. Um, but in addition to this large copy, and you can see here on the bottom, there's here you have a running section of 15 preserved columns, and we're fortunate to have the beginning of the manuscript, and we're certain of that because you can see on the right hand side here,
Yeah.
there's all this empty space, which shows us that yes, this was the start. And then there's some other fragments that aren't included in the picture of later portions of material. But the War Scroll, as we have it, is not complete. So there's material that extended past the 19 columns that scholars have been able to more or less identify. So we have no idea how large this particular document was.
Wow.
So that's the first site. We should probably include links for these in the description too. So so if you want to go and look at pictures of the Dead Sea Scrolls, this is one of the places to go. The other place is the Leon Levy. It's the Leon Levy Dead Sea Scrolls Digital Library, and this is where most of the Dead Sea Scrolls fragments are housed at the Israel Antiquities Authority, and the good people there have been very busy photographing every single fragment and uploading them to this site. You can actually come and to this site and look at pictures of just about every single fragment discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the pictures are the pictures are for Q493. The pictures are sensational. They're high quality digital color and infrared images.
That one looks like real clear.
Yeah.
Now, is that the War Scroll too?
This is a copy of the War Scroll, yeah.
Wow.
So this is, I believe this is War Scroll C. So there are, I have to look this up now. I think there are, let's pull that out of the way. Let's look here. There's 4 or 5, maybe 6 copies.
Oh, nice.
Of the War Scroll. I think this one is, there it is. Okay, so let's see here. What does this say? So yeah, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, 9 copies.
Wow.
Spread between 3 different caves. Most of the copies of the War Scroll. Well, this is the interesting thing, right? So first they found 1 QM, the copy of the large copy of the War Scroll from Cave 1, and then over time, all of these fragments from hundreds and hundreds of other manuscripts were filtering into the museum, and they were able to piece together fragments from several other copies that came from Cave 4 as well as from Cave 11. And what they discovered was that there are some pretty dramatic differences between them. And this is where I would like to spend a little bit of time, if we can, talking about one of these manuscripts. It's one of my favorites. Is that all right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So tried to get that in there. So this is 4Q491, which is otherwise designated 4QMA. This is the first manuscript of the War Scroll that they just discovered.
Can you
in
imagine
K4.
trying to put that all together? Can you imagine that?
Well, I mean, I do this a little bit, and I can maybe I'll just show you this right now. I mean, one of the really remarkable things about this particular manuscript, there's a story behind this particular manuscript. It was assigned to a French scholar by the name of Maurice Baillet, and it's a funny story because he was doing some work when he was assigned to the team. He was doing some work with some very tiny little fragments, and the leader of the team got it into his head that he must really like this kind of work. So he actually went and assigned him all the shittiest, crappiest little bits of tiny fragments.
That's great.
For him to work on.
So great.
And it was just a huge misunderstanding in the beginning. But poor Maurice Baillet ended up having to sort through just the most crappy, terrible stuff that you've ever seen. But one of the manuscripts that he was assigned was this one, 4QMA. Now they already knew about the War Scroll, and when it came to piecing the fragments together, he did what scholars naturally tend to do, is he just took them and decided, well, you know, this group of fragments up here that you see, this first group, they contain material from column 7. This second group down here contains material from column 14, and then there's a third large group that contains something that was completely foreign to the War Scroll, but then also stuff from column 17. So he did what, as I said, a scholar would naturally do, and just say, well, this is the order in which these fragments belong. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Thinking it just follows the same structure of the copy of the War Scroll that we know. Now, this particular copy is a good 100 years older than the copy from Cave 1. And I will show you the really, really interesting fragment here. This is fragment 11. And my mentor, Professor Martin Abegg, when he was a PhD student, he actually came to notice, when looking at this fragment, there's a column break. You can see here, right here. You can see the blank space here.
Yeah, you could.
Now, when you look closely, it's better actually if I go to this picture here. Oh shoot, no, it didn't work. It's better if I go to the infrared image. Just give me a second to pull it up here. Of course, they put all the little guys on the front. The unfortunate thing about this site is it's not the easiest to navigate. It's a bit clumsy sometimes. Okay, so here we go. This is the infrared picture here. So, and you have the two columns, and you can see clearly the blank space that divides them.
Yeah.
He noticed, looking closely at it, that the script in this first column is a little bit different than the script in the second column. And so his thought right away is, whoa, these fragments don't belong together.
Really?
They've been inappropriately joined. They actually represent two entirely separate manuscripts. And this came up a significant part of his PhD dissertation.
Wow.
Yeah, it is pretty neat. And one of the really interesting things too about about this particular fragment here and these two columns is that on the left, and remember you're reading Hebrew from the right to the left, so you'd read this first, this column on the right you'd read first, and then you go to the column on the left. So this column on the left preserves text from that looks like 1QM column 17, but it's got some interesting differences in it. This column before it contains something that doesn't appear anywhere in the Cave 1 copy of the War Scroll, and it's been designated by scholars as the Song of Michael or the Song of the Just. It's a hymn.
Nice.
And or the self-glorification hymn is another way of interpreting it. I'm just gonna pull it up here.
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
read
say,
a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
From this,
because it seems like they're writing as if they are winning, like as if they already won. This is like some I don't know how you describe it.
In column 17 or in the or in the, are you talking about in the self-glorification hymn?
That's what it's called. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm just going to read a little bit of this.
Sure.
Here.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So this is, okay. It's in a whole different section here. 4K491. C.
You want to real quick explain who the sons of light are, who the sons of darkness is, just to set the tone, and then read it.
So let's
understand what. Then they'll understand what they're. You know what I mean?
Yes. So the sons of light in the War Scroll and elsewhere in a number of the Dead Sea Scrolls are this community of Essenes, what we call the Yachad Essenes, the people who basically wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Sons of Darkness are basically everybody who's not part of this community of who is somebody who doesn't think the same way as these
and even, if I'm not mistaken, even other Jews in their mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, there are some manuscripts, there are some texts in the Dead Sea Scrolls which suggest that in the last days, the expectation of the people living at Qumran was that in the last days, God would essentially wipe out everybody living in the land, and this is the proper promised land, the land of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba. So God would wipe out everybody in the land as a means to purify the land.
Wow.
And that all that would be left are those who follow the precepts of God.
Now, before you read that, because I definitely want to hear what it is. That's going to be fascinating. I want to point this out, that I think, looking back, it was the opposite. I think those are the guys who got wiped out, and everyone else are the ones who survived. Especially what happened later on when the Vespasian and Titus came and sacked Jerusalem. They went after the rebels. They didn't go after the moderate ones. And
sure.
What was I going to say? Yeah, and a lot of people would like to point out that the sons of light, they must be the Christians, and it's like, well, not necessarily, because we know from, if you actually read not the entire scroll, if you read a good chunk of the scrolls, you'll understand that the sons of Zadok are probably aligned with the sons of light. The sons of Zadok are the Sadducees, where the word Sadducees even comes from. Sadducees is a Greek word for Saduk. Was it Saduki, or how do you say it?
For Sadducee?
Yeah.
I mean, the Hebrew it's Sadukim.
Sadukim.
And it literally
means sons of Sadok. Right?
Sadukim itself just means righteous ones.
Oh, that's
right.
That's what Zadok's name. Zadok's name means righteous one. Yeah. So that's what it is.
Yeah. So, and these are, this is
and Zadok was the high priest.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Or one of them.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. Yeah. So
there's within within at the time of Jesus, um, if you were a Tzadokite or a Tzaddikim or a Sadducee, this meant that you were part of this very exclusive elite group of officiating priests
And they were the
in the
ones that
Jerusalem
they were the
temple.
ones that ran the temple, the Levites, the
Yeah,
whatever. Those were the
there's
Sadducees.
probably
The
there's probably
Pharisees
not
were,
any. There's probably I don't know if this is controversial or not. There's it's hard to say even if there are still Levites
yeah,
at
no,
the
I don't know
time
about that.
of Jesus. But yeah, there's different groups, different classes of priests, and if we think of them in in like in circles, in your large circles, you've just got the Kohen, the
Yeah,
priests. In a smaller circle, you've got the Bnei Acharon, the sons of Aaron,
right.
and
And I think they
these
were
are
Levites. So I think that
no,
no?
no, they were not.
Okay. I didn't know
So,
that.
and the Bnei Acharon were definitely distinct from the Levites, and in fact,
Oh.
this is one of the things that one of the reforms that takes place within the book of Deuteronomy at the time of Josiah
Wow. I didn't
was
know that.
basically the elevation of the Levites to the same level as the
What?
Bnei
Okay,
Acharon, the sons of
now I
Aaron.
understand what you're
There
saying.
you go. And then later, um, there's an even smaller group that we recognize as the Tzaddikim,
Right.
the Saddukites.
Right. And the
And
Pharisees the Pharisees are the more moderate. They're the ones who are looking at like Platonic philosophy. They're looking at Greek mythology, and they're more accepting towards it. Not exactly doing that, but they're more like with the times, more modern, more postmodern
yeah,
than the
and
Sadducees.
let's be clear here too. Pharisees are not priests.
Oh yeah, of course not. Yeah.
So uh, these are these are the men of the people.
Right.
um, and yeah, and they are introducing a more um, a more modern, a more populist, a more cosmopolitan expression of Judaism, as you said.
Exactly.
Drawing from Greek philosophy and from from other from other traditions
Yeah.
in order to sort of reshape Judaism. And
Then they got
the
the Essenes.
writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls actually called the Pharisees the seeker of smooth things
That's
because
interesting.
they thought that they were just way too warm and fuzzy.
Right, and it's so funny.
And
You get the opposite teaching or the opposite portrayal of them in the New Testament. It's
and the reason, but
everything's
there's
backwards.
well, I mean, it's you could look at it that way. There's a really, really good reason for this, and that's because um, Jesus and his disciples and those first Christians were from a social class that never had any interaction at all with the Sadducees, the Sadducees, the temple priests. They were just not running in the same circles.
Yeah, and so last
So
but not least, we got the Essenes, and then let's read that. That's what I'm just trying
yeah,
to set the tone so everyone knows the setting of where we're at.
no, it's good. It's good. So so this self-glorification hymn is probably going to sound a little bit weird to some of you. This is in one of the copies of the War Scroll, 4Q 491 or 4Q MA. It starts, has done awesome things marvelously, and then there's a break. In the strength of his power, the just exult, and the holy ones rejoice in justice. He established Israel from eternity, his truth, and the mysteries of his wisdom in all generations, and the counsel of the poor for an eternal congregation. There's breaks in the text here because, as you can see from the picture, it's very, very
Yes.
fragmentary,
Yeah.
right? So there's lots of stuff we don't know what's going on here.
Yeah.
A mighty throne in the congregation of the gods, above which none of the kings of the east shall sit, and their nobles, and then something, My glory, the speaker here, is incomparable, and besides me, no one is exalted, nor comes to me, for I reside in somewhere in the heavens, and there is no something else. I am counted among the gods, and my dwelling is in the holy congregation. My desire is not according to flesh, but all that is precious to me is in the glory of something, the holy dwelling, who has been considered despicable on my account, and who is comparable to me in my glory, who, like the sailors, will come back and tell, who hears all sorrows like me, and who suffers evil like me. There is no one. I have been instructed, and there is no teaching comparable to my teaching. And who will attack me when I open my mouth? And who can endure the flow of my lips? And who will confront me and retain comparison with my judgment? And it goes on like that for a little bit. But this is the reason it's called the self-glorification hymn is because this sounds like an exalted divine figure. He talks about being in the council of the gods.
And that's
he
funny
talks about
because
being...
a lot of people don't realize that back then, or even right now, even with the modern Masoretic text, Elohim is a plural word that means gods. It doesn't mean one, it means many. Yes. Now that gets most people don't even know that. I mean, I'm wondering, a lot of the remnants, even if with the modern translations, still have the remnants of old polytheism intertwined in the text. I don't know if this is an example of that, but it sure sounds like it.
Well, one of the aspects of apocalyptic Jewish literature is basically there's within a lot of this stuff a throwback to the old myths, to the old the old stories and the old concepts that developed within the really early period of the religion, where there was a pantheon, a divine council,
even a wife,
gods.
Wife named Asherah.
Right.
That's going back far, though. I'm sure that's before scripture was even being written. I think that might have been inscribed in some stone somewhere. But I'm going back a little farther.
That's part of a different discussion altogether.
It is. But by the time Job gets written, there's a whole council, and there's the accuser, and that just gets translated into what we know as Satan.
True.
You know.
So, but here we have this hymn, this poem, within this copy of the War Scroll, and this was one of the reasons why my mentor Marty Abeg, and it's written in a different script you can see here too. So he thought, this is wrong. This doesn't belong to the same manuscript. It's actually it's been misassigned, and it actually probably has nothing to do with the War Scroll. So I'm gonna switch gears here a little bit. This argument held sway for quite a long time, and was adopted by scholars. This was the consensus theory for quite a while. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, I started working just on this particular manuscript, and I noticed something interesting about these fragments with these two different scripts, one of which contains material that we recognize from the War Scroll, and then this other one in this, which is sort of set in this column prior to it, but possibly misassigned, and you can see a little join there too, kind of between them, which contains this weird self-glorification hymn. And actually, I'll just say this as well. We know this self-glorification hymn from a couple of other manuscripts, but not copies of the War Scroll. Interestingly enough, this hymn appears in an entirely different document called the Chodayot, or the Thanksgiving Psalms.
Right.
There's 3 other copies of just this hymn, but mixed in with a whole bunch of other hymns. So, but I started looking at just the fragments of this one manuscript, and looking at them from a material perspective. So there we have columns, fragment 11, columns 1 and column 2. There's fragment 12. You can see all this, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. So I started kind of deconstructing this, and this fragment group is comprised of a whole bunch of different individual pieces that I have numbered in order to kind of organize them. And then I started comparing them. One of the ways in which scholars will reconstruct Dead Sea Scrolls manuscripts out of the fragments is to look at corresponding shapes, because the way that they're rolled up, when something is rolled up, it will and it deteriorates. You can kind of see, if you look just from the top down, that you've suddenly got all these layers of material stacked one on top of each other, and they'll deteriorate fairly uniformly, so they maintain a similar shape. So a lot of this is literally putting things together, kind of like you would a jigsaw puzzle, just by matching shapes. So I started deconstructing these and looking at just some of the basic shapes themselves, and I noticed some interesting things. So there's some really clear correspondences between the shapes and as well between the measurements on a number of these fragments. Like in this section here, comparing these two fragments that I've designated 11 delta 1 and 2, 11 gamma and 11 beta. You can see the red arrow there.
Yeah.
It's the same distance.
I see.
The distance between these yellow lines here, where you see the blue arrow, it's the same distance. You look at the angle on some of these fragments, it looks very similar. Same here too. And as you start to piece the whole thing together, you start to see, it sure looks like, just on the basis of the shapes themselves, that even though there's two different handwritings, even though one of these columns looks like it's completely foreign to the war scroll, it sure looks like they were part of the same manuscript.
That's interesting.
And it goes on. You'll look, you can see the numbers here. This blue line on this, on what I've identified as the bottom layer, measures 8.9 centimeters. This green line, which I've labeled as the top layer, measures 8.85 centimeters. So it's like a 5 millimeter difference between them.
Right.
These vertical measurements, 6.6 centimeters and 7.6 centimeters. It's within a centimeter of each other.
Yeah.
These measurements across 7.9 and 8.0 centimeters. So there's a lot of correspondence between the material that had me convinced finally by this point. Yes, these do probably all belong to the same manuscripts, which is really exciting. And I separated them and color coded them in terms of how I imagined they would have sat on top of one another in a roll, and it would have looked something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and in terms of the actual area, layer 1 comprises 34.51 square centimeters, layer 2 34.13 square centimeters. So it's very, very close.
Yeah.
But there's even more going on here. I started looking closely at the color photographs of this particular manuscript and taking account of what I call stress points and points of damage. And I color coded them all. On the right, I color coded them blue, and on the left, I color coded them green. And when you put them together, suddenly you can actually see where the stress points between these fragments overlap. So we end up here with I'm illustrating here with this red line, in my mind, a clear indication that these fragments were together in this one manuscript. And then when you unroll the whole thing, it's the damage. So I illustrate that all to say No, these are not separate manuscripts. This is all part of the same manuscript, and this is really exciting for a couple of
I
reasons.
actually think you're right. I do. I think that's definitely true. It looks like it. Now, let me ask you this real quick. Let me ask you this. The
Sure.
first one you showed where the person wrote dissertation, is this the same one?
Same manuscript?
Is this the same one? Yeah, because he said there was two of them. Okay.
Yes.
I didn't want to say this at first, but I in my head, I'm looking at the two shins. He has a little dot in the middle of the shins.
Yeah.
It looked like the same person was writing both of them. So when you said,
well, this is
when you said you wrote a dissertation saying there was one, in my head, I was like, I don't really see it. But you're pointing out that they're the same, and now I see it. Like from my point of view, I think you're right, and I'm not just saying that because I know you. I legitimately think these are the same. That's the same scroll.
Well, it's the same scroll, but he is right that the hands are a little different from each other. So
I take his word for it. He knows a lot more than I do. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean,
I just don't see it.
It's hard to see unless you're practiced at looking at these things really closely.
Absolutely,
right?
I agree.
So, but I have also made the argument that it could actually be the same scribe writing at different times in his own life, or writing under different conditions.
That shin looks so peculiar. Look at that shin with the dot in the middle. You see my?
I know, it's beautiful, isn't it?
It looks, there's no way that two people were writing that the same way.
But then look at the shin on the other fragment where it doesn't just have the little dot in the center.
Yeah, let's go see that real quick because I thought it looked the same.
It's actually right here on this. If you look at, these are two fragments.
Yeah, doesn't it look the same kind of with the dot in the middle? I guess the other one's pointing.
I can't pull up my cursor. I'll show you. Actually, I can do it here. I can't see yours. Okay, but I'll here, we'll look at this one.
There we go.
So here, we'll get right in.
Yeah.
There's the sheen you're talking about.
Yeah, that is a very that's a very original looking shin.
It is.
So
that center arm is basically like a little dot.
Usually
we go over to this side here. That one is not entirely.
Okay, so now I see what you're saying. This looks like it's the same person did it at different times. Because now you're right. It does look like a different flow of writing. Now I see what you're saying. But it's definitely the same person because he's writing his shin the same way with a little dot in the middle. That's very
I think it probably is. So I mean, this is the argument that I made about these two different hands, and this just kind of gives you an idea of the size of the script.
Mm-hmm.
The letters are about 2 millimeters. It's very, very small. So I suggested, when I write carefully with a ballpoint pen, does it appear differently from when I scribble with a Sharpie?
And it does.
It does.
Yeah.
And I think this probably also happened in antiquity too. So this doesn't necessarily have to be two separate people writing on the same scroll. This could be the same person writing on this scroll, but maybe at different points in time, even within a couple weeks.
Yeah, it could be a short period of time, but it could be a different instrument, maybe a different location, maybe a different whatever, maybe different.
Exactly.
Yeah, but exactly. I think you could conclude it's the same person.
But the implications of this are really huge. I mean, in the first place, we have one of the things that we have that's very, very interesting here is an example of a manuscript that has two different styles, although minutely different, two different styles of writing on it, which is pretty unusual in this sort of a situation. You see it in something like, you see this in the Temple Scroll, where it looks like the earlier sheets had to be basically recopied and then replaced, probably because it worn out, and it's done in a different hand. So you have another example here of a manuscript that has, these two different styles of handwriting.
Right.
There's the other manuscripts where this so-called self-glorification hymn appears, 4Q427, the Hodayot, and in 4Q471b. So, and this is one of my arguments too with regards to this weird self-glorification hymn is that it seems that this hymn may have inspired um, what took place in later copies of the War Scroll. Because this little section here in column 17 of the War Scroll does not appear in this older copy from K4 that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And this is a famous passage where it talks about the Archangel Michael.
Yeah.
And it says, "Today is God's appointed time to subdue and humiliate the prince of the realm of wickedness. He will send eternal support to the company of his redeemed by the power of the majestic angel and the authority of Michael. By eternal light, he shall joyfully light up the covenant of Israel, peace and blessing for the lot of God, to exalt the authority of Michael among the gods and the dominion of Israel among all flesh." Now, doesn't that kind of sound a little bit like the figure that was described in the self-glorification?
Now, hold that thought for 1 second. This brings me to the question that I was trying to actually go to, and you just walk right into it. Because later on, this is perfect. Later on, it says, "Rise up, O hero, lead off thy captives, O glorious one, gather up the spoil." So they're talking about this hero. It says, "King of glory, sovereign is holy, with our foot soldiers and horsemen." He's basically saying he's going to put their foot on their necks. And what he's describing, whoever's writing is describing Israel is winning against Rome.
Yeah.
They're not losing, they're winning, and there's no way they can lose. It's impossible, they're basically saying, which obviously didn't happen. But I think it's fascinating. And my question for you is, are they referring to a Messiah figure, or are they referring to Yahweh? Especially when you throw Michael in there. That makes things a little bit...
I'm not sure if I like the term Messiah figure applied here, because they had a different idea of who the Messiah was and what he was going to do. It's definitely a celestial figure.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's this is a cosmic being of enormous power who's fighting on their behalf. It looks like you're reading from column 19, I think.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
That's what
it was. That's
so
exactly
I think this figure probably is the same angel, the majestic angel of authority.
Michael.
Michael identified
That's
here
actually,
in column 17.
You know what? You just convinced me right there. By pulling this up, I didn't, this is a different scroll. This is the same War Scroll, but it's a different copy. And this is 4, right? Is this 4?
This actually, what you're looking at here is actually from the War Scroll. So this is column 17. But the point I'm making here is that this whole idea of this cosmic celestial figure that developed that was going to come to the aid of the troops of God and defeat the troops of Belial.
Yeah.
This is a development from the hymn that we read.
And this sort of Messianic Judaism, I think, is like in the air. It's not like exactly the way we see it now, but it was like very allegorical, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I would say, like, at Qumran, the Messiahs, because it's not just one.
That's true too. That's a good point. There's a bunch of them. Yeah.
There's an anointed priest and an anointed king.
Yeah.
Who were going
Isn't one supposed to be suffering and the other one's supposed to be dominant, or what do you call it? Like triumphant?
Well, that's and now we're kind of getting into the weeds here of what might be a competing idea.
Yeah.
A competing form of messianism that wasn't necessarily adopted by the same people in the Qumran community.
Good point.
We're pretty confident that the people who wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls had in their mind that in the last days there was going to be a king and there was going to be a priest.
Yeah.
A great king and a great priest, but these were human beings.
And the archetypes you have these archetypes. You have Moses
Yeah.
being like the priest figure,
Or
and then you have
yeah,
David,
and
the king
David.
figure. But
Well,
it could
more
be
appropriately,
outside, or
Aaron.
Cyrus too. Was an outside figure who was considered Messiah. So I wonder if now
Yeah.
in this particular sense, that's not happening. They're talking about in-house Israel, gonna no one else, everyone else bows to us.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I
And
think
I
they're looking
don't
for a
think
David archetype.
if you were to ask uh, a Qumranite, if you were to pull him up, a guy from the first century who was living in Qumran and who knew these texts, and you asked him, this figure here that's being described in the War Scroll, is this the Messiah? He probably would have said at first, which one?
Yeah.
And then he probably would have said no.
Yeah.
Because this is not a human being.
But then, okay, now I agree with you. You're making this very clear for me and probably whoever's watching. This is why I wanted to have you on.
So, and I
let
think,
me ask you this though: the realm of wickedness, the prince of realm of wickedness. Now, if Geza is right, and this is the time of Julius Caesar, do you think this is a reference to the Caesar? Maybe not Julius Caesar, maybe Augustus, maybe before. I don't know. Like maybe you think that's what this is?
That's probably a good. I mean, it's a good bet.
We can't prove it, obviously,
no,
yeah,
certainly not.
The
but
realm of wickedness being Rome, though, would be probably because Rome is known as like this new Babylon where there's always pagans everywhere, and they just
not only that, but I mean, if you think about it at the time period from the perspective of the people living in Judea, Rome represented the entire world.
Yeah.
The entire rest of the world was essentially the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
So this global perspective, this wicked global power,
yeah,
was something that resonated with them, and they certainly had, you know, an idea of what this looked like based on their own history and what was happening to them in the moment.
And you make a good point. A lot of people don't realize they see the Rome and they look at the map of Rome and it's like the Mediterranean and they see that, but they don't realize is that Gaul and Germany were paying tribute to Rome, and not only that, they were sending troops. You read Tacitus and Suetonius. If Rome wanted troops, they would go there and hey, give us your slaves right now. We need troops. So
exactly,
like you said, like just to add to what you're saying, the whole rest of the world, especially the West, was basically Rome. In the same way we see the West right now is like this free. It was more of like a like liberty based world, whereas in Israel and the East was more of like a righteous world, or is like, you know, pay your tributes and go to the and you know, it was like more based on purity and all that, especially Qumran.
Yeah,
Qumran is all about their purity. They have a whole scroll about that, but that's a topic for another day.
And actually, I mean, it's an interesting point that you bring up with regards. I mean, with regards to the War Scroll, there's huge sections of it, particularly in the early part, in the earlier columns. I think it's column 3 through column 8 or 9. Is just a collection of rules. Is that the right one there? Yeah, like. Yeah. And the kinds of rules have a great deal to do with purity. I'm just going to see if I can pull something up from the War Scroll, 1QM column 7. And this is part of a list of rules and instructions on how the men are supposed to prepare themselves for battle in the last days. Those governing the camps shall be between 40, 50, and 60 years old. The supervisors shall also be between 40 and 50 years old, and all those who despoil the fallen, and those who pillage the loot, and those who cleanse the earth, and those who protect the weapons, and those who prepare the supplies, all shall be between 25 and 30 years old. Now listen to this. And no young boy, nor any woman at all, shall enter the camps when they leave Jerusalem to go to war until they return. And no lame, no blind, no paralyzed person, nor any man who has an indelible blemish on his flesh, nor any man suffering from uncleanness in his flesh. None of these will go out to war with them. And these shall be volunteers for war, perfect in spirit and in body, and ready for the day of vengeance. And every man who has not cleansed himself of his spring, or his ejaculations on the day of battle, will not go down with them. And here's why.
What?
For the holy angels are together with their armies, and there will be space between all their camps and the place of the head for about 2,000 cubits, and no immodest nakedness will be seen in the surroundings of the camp. So do you hear what's going on there?
Sum that up real quick. That sounded pretty crazy. I want to make sure that I'm not hearing stuff.
So there's all these stipulations about maintaining. I mean, everybody has to be the right age.
Yeah.
Everybody has to be fit, but everybody has to maintain a proper sense of ritual purification.
Right.
There's no women allowed in the camp, and the entire reason for this.
Wait, what were they saying about letting off? What did they say? Letting off a load or something?
Yeah. So
what was that about?
That's about you're not allowed to ejaculate in camp. So,
you're not allowed to. Okay.
No, you're not allowed to. And the whole reason for this, the whole purpose behind this, is because it is believed that the human members of the army of God are going to be fighting right alongside the angels. So because of that,
and that's more important than battle plans. Like that means everything.
Absolutely. And that's what's going to ensure victory too.
That's fascinating
for the
stuff
people
right there.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty cool. But this is, I think too, you get a really interesting sense of this as well. What's sort of going on here when you imagine that these are things that were this formed a liturgy, and it was something that was performed quite possibly. I just wanted to show one more thing here, which I think we were speaking. One of the things we were talking about are the implications, in particular for this manuscript, for the War Scroll, and it's this. If you can see on my screen, I've got these three groups of fragments, and this is the way the first editor organized them. Fragments 1 to 3. He had first because those preserve text from column 7 of the Cave 1 War Scroll. Fragments 8 to 10 preserve text from, I think it's column 14 of the Cave 1 copy of the War Scroll. And then fragment 11, column 1, contains that weird self-glorification hymn. And then the second column contains text from fragments or from column 17 of the War Scroll. So he put them in order, right? But here's the problem. Fragments 1 to 3 are written in script 1. Fragments 8 to 10 are written in script 2. But then the first column of fragment 11 is written in script 1, and the second column is written in script 2. So what we have here is a situation where this is an impossible arrangement because of the scripts, even though it would follow the organization within the War Scroll. So yeah, there we have 1 QM 7:3 to 12, 1 QM 14 4 to 18, and some stuff from columns 15 and 16, and over there columns 16:3 to 17:14. So this arrangement follows the ordered progression of what's in the War Scroll, but because the scripts are mixed up, it doesn't work. So I think what's more likely going on is this. You've got stuff that looks like column 7 from the War Scroll, followed by stuff that looks like column 6, followed by this self-glorification hymn that we talked about. And then at that point, the script changes. And following that, you got stuff that looks like columns 16 and 17 of the War Scroll. And then after that, you've got stuff that looks like columns 14 and 15 and 16 from the War Scroll. So what this shows us is that at one point in time, these things that ended up going into the War Scroll were being circulated, and there were probably individual independent traditions that were being circulated and were collected, not necessarily in the same order as what's in the War Scroll, and there's stuff that was clearly developing. And what you end up then with in the War Scroll is like a late version of all these traditions collected together, with some updates. One of those important updates is the elimination of the where's my cursor? Oh, go get rid of that. There we go. The elimination of the so-called self-glorification hymn. But then you also have this introduction of this Michael figure in a later copy. Yeah. So it's a really, really interesting, complex text. And this is also another one of the reasons why it makes sense as like a liturgical text.
Right.
If these are individual songs and hymns and liturgies and stuff that's being spoken or performed, then it makes sense that they're going to collect them and put them together, and it's going to grow, and in different copies you have things rearranged and put in different order. So yeah. It's
you get a feel of the genre that's around at the time, with sort of like Daniel, and then later would come Revelation. I mean, I know I just spread out those are different time periods, but in the grand scheme of things, you can feel out it's sort of its own genre. There's apocalyptic text, liturgical text, sort of prophetic layers in there. It's sort of how they were writing this stuff back then. It's very fascinating. It's political.
It is, and I would very much so. And I would say though that like I don't think, like I said at the beginning, the War Scroll was obviously exhibits this apocalyptic worldview, but I wouldn't say it's an apocalyptic text the same as like Daniel or Enoch or the Book of Revelation or what am I thinking of? Like so some of these what we would call, I guess, classical examples of apocalyptic texts which follow more of a formula. The War Scroll contains some of that, but also looks really different.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a very, very interesting document.
So let's sum it up real quick. So the scroll is talking about a war between them and the Kittim, which is Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically saying, to me, it seems like they're trying to hype up their army, their people, but also at the same time remind them, we're the chosen people. Keep your purity. Do this, do that. Make sure everything's in order. This is going to happen. It's all been written down. We're going to win this war. Everyone will bow to us. The end. Very happy ending.
Yeah.
It obviously doesn't play out that way, but they're trying to push that into the heads of the people so that they can go to war thinking we're going to win and give them confidence. So it's political in that sense.
I'm thinking that it's probably not, like, I think if by this time the people who are writing and collecting the Dead Sea Scrolls recognize what's in the Book of Daniel, within the Daniel 7 through 12. To them, there is an anticipation that this is predictive of what's going to happen in the last days. And I think their ideas about that sort of flow out into the descriptions of war that appear in the War Scroll. But this is where I like the idea that this is possibly a performative text. I think this is where I like this idea, in that I'm not sure they understood the contents of the War Scroll as a prophecy in the same sort of way. And what I mean by that is, I don't think they were poring over the text of the War Scroll going, this is what's going to happen. I think it was more along the lines of, we have this general idea of what's going to happen in broad strokes, but that this document, that's a performative liturgical document, is an expression of the anticipation of what's going to happen. So probably not. I'm hesitant to talk about the War Scroll in the vein of prophecy,
right?
Just because I think the mindset of the people is quite different, just with regards to this one text, right?
Yeah,
and it is because it's such a unique text,
and you know what?
It's really unlike anything that we've got.
It really is. That's why I wanted to do a video just on it. You know what I can compare it to, though? The way you said it is, when a boxer comes out to fight, the music is playing. It's always in music, like a rap song, something that's like, how good this is over. I'm gonna crush this dude. I'm not gonna lose. Like, that's the feeling. It is. That's basically
hype music, right?
Yeah, it's fight.
That's what they call it. It's hype music.
They're vibing. They're ready to go to war. That's what it is. It's very similar. It's not like, it's really, like you said, it's not like they're trying to nail specific prophecies. They're just like, when they say things like, I'm going to put my foot on the enemy's neck, that sounds like hype up music or poetry. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's what that is.
Totally. And that's not to say that they didn't think, like, I'm sure they had in mind that, it was going to be an absolute triumphant victory in which their enemies were going to be decimated and totally crushed, right? But probably not committing themselves to it happening exactly like this, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's cool.
It is cool. This has been fun, and
it has.
And there's so much more in these scrolls that I want to do other videos on. So everyone, stay tuned.
Totally.
Subscribe to Kipp Davis, and stay tuned for more. And you have just attained true gnosis.